Of course, on a Monday, we always chat to the ACL, and I've got Rob Norman on the phone, who's the Queensland Director of the Australian Christian Lobby. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
How are you, Robbo? I'm doing very well, thanks, mate. It's good to be with you.
Yes, good to chat with you today. And I guess an important question in September is always, did your team win on the weekend? Of course, it's finals footy at the moment. Are you still cheering for a team that's winning, or is your team long gone?
No, I am, mate. I'm as happy as I'm a Carlton supporter in Victoria. I follow the AFL, and Carlton have been in the woods for a long time, mate. So I was very happy on the weekend.
Up the mighty Blues, eh?
That's it.
That's great. Yes, well, another one of our staff here are very passionate Blues fans as well. So there's been some big smiles here this morning, which is very good. I guess that's the love of September, isn't it? That if your team's still in the finals, that's always a good thing.
That's exactly right, mate. It's all good.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it's all good.
I'm not confident about next week, mind you. We've got Melbourne coming up, so that's going to be a big one.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I guess everything's elimination from here on in, isn't it? So exciting times. Anyway, speaking of elimination, I'm not sure. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I know Anastasia Palaszczuk's back in the driver's seat today. She's been away on a couple of weeks' holiday, and I've got to say, I feel a bit for these, political leaders who need a break. I mean, they work so hard and they take a couple of weeks off, but while the cat's away, the mice play, and there's been lots of speculation going on. I mean, how do you feel for people like the Queensland State Premier, who's come back today, first day back in the job, but there's been lots of talk about whether or not she's going to stay on as the State Premier?
Yeah, it is tough, Robbo. She's been on a holiday, and I think the media probably enjoyed a bit of a holiday with her. They followed her around wherever she went, by the looks of it. But you're right, there is talk around the ridges that her job might be on a short list. So it's all ears to the ground on that one, Robbo. I don't have any inside information on it. I don't think anybody does, but there's certainly lots of whispers happening around the place, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the thing that we know about the secular media is you need to take everything they say with a grain of salt. But there certainly has been lots of whispers for sure. But something we can say for certain is something that took place just before she left on that holiday. That was back at the towards the end of August. Her government really rammed through some big amendments to its child protection and offending reporter and offender prohibition order and other legislation amendment bill. I mean, that's a mouthful, isn't it? But anyway, some big amendments in there, including particularly around sex workers.
Yes, Robbo, this bill, it became a Trojan horse. So in its original form, it was probably a reasonable bill, and it did look at some true, protection issues for young people particularly. But ultimately, the police minister picked it up and used it to barrel a whole bunch of legislation through, including two recommendations to essentially legalise prostitution. So you might, and your listeners probably know as well, that the Queensland Law Reform Commission has made recommendation for a decriminalised prostitution industry in Queensland. So this bill carried two of the big recommendations through. It basically legalised street solicitation for prostitution purposes. And secondly, it also disarmed police when it comes to covert operations or move on orders even with street soliciting. So it's a very interesting point in the history, I guess, of Queensland when it comes to the sex industry. Because what we see now is that essentially, Robbo, prostitution is still illegal in Queensland outside of the licensed brothels, but the police don't have powers to prosecute. And so we're kind of in this limbo situation, and we're expecting, I guess, that there will be a full-scale bill coming up for the decriminalisation of prostitution probably by the end of this year.
Wow, that's very concerning.
That's the way that thing's looking. It is, and you know what? There were other things that went through on that bill as well, including, and this, the big one is that we know that youth can now be detained at police stations. They can be used as the lockup facilities can be used as detention centres, and so this is a government that's in crisis when it comes to youth justice, and the fact that bill went through, Robbo, so easily, and it was completely partisan. And so not even the Greens voted for it. The bill went through completely on the force of the Labor vote only.
Wow.
It's caused a big stir, and it's opened the door to, of course, the full decriminalisation of prostitution, which, of course, we're not happy with.
Yeah, well, fair enough too. And I guess the thing with that, I mean, it was, the amendments were presented without any notice. There was no scrutiny. There was no public consultation. Like, it really was. I mean, you called it a Trojan horse, but it was, rushed through as well, which is concerning. Obviously, Queensland is one of the few states without an upper house, so there's no sort of second tier of checks and balances, is there?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is part of a bigger picture, and the southern states often refer to us as the cowboy state when it comes to politics. And when you see things like this, Robbo, it gives them, unfortunately, justification for saying things like that, because it really did get forced through. As you say, we have one house, and the party that has majority will inevitably get their bills through. And so that's what's happened in this case. But you know what? There is a glimmering light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm hoping it's not a train coming towards us. So in South Australia, what we've seen down there is, and this is my home state, it's a state I still love, obviously, and have lots of friends there. One of the MLCs, a lady called Nicola Centofanti, has introduced a bill into the SA Parliament, Robbo, that is based on the Nordic model of prostitution. So this is huge in terms of the ACL journey. We've been advocating for this model for over 10 years. It's like any model, it's not perfect, but what it has proven to do in the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, even France, even Ireland, this bill has been introduced into parliaments and made legislation, and it has reduced the whole industry. It's reduced it significantly. And so if you compare a nation, for instance, and I'm sorry for going on about this, but I'm very passionate about it. If you compare Sweden, for instance, with Germany, which is completely legalised prostitution, 1 in 175 Germans have direct involvement in the prostitution industry. If you look at Sweden, it's more like 1 in 10,000. And so that's the kind of difference we look at when it comes to implementing the right model.
Wow.
So the Nordic model essentially criminalises the buying of sex, and it provides pathways out of prostitution for young girls and women that are trapped in the industry and essentially become slaves to the industry.
Mm.
So there's a glimmer of hope, and hopefully we can see that kind of thing in Queensland at some point. And so we're certainly advocating for that.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It certainly is a huge issue and something that requires a lot of thought. And I guess, we want to see things much more considered through the political process rather than just, rushing things through without really any thought at all. So that's certainly one to keep an eye on. Another big thing that you guys have been, speaking about is parental rights. Tell us what is happening with that.
Yeah, this parental rights. Look, this underlies. It's a fundamental of society, and so when you think about it, the primacy of families is something that we value as a Western secular democratic society, and it goes right back. It goes back to biblical times, and so we see essentially the family as being the basic unit for law and order, for the well-being of children. We have biblical foundations that are built on that thing. And so at the moment what we're seeing is that there are laws that are creeping in that are undermining parental rights. And so a good example of that would be the Birth, Deaths and Marriages Amendment Bill that went through previously in Queensland just a few months ago. And what that bill does is that it will allow children as young as 12 to change their sex on the Birth, Deaths and Marriages Register. In other words, their birth certificate sex can be changed without any parental permission or even knowledge.
Wow.
And so that's a disaster, obviously. Mm. And then if you extrapolate that, Robbo, it's also happening in the equality bills that are being raised through the country. So Victoria's already got a so-called equality bill that, again, allows young children as young as 12 to transition genders, to begin cross-sex hormone treatment, ultimately surgery that goes with sex change operations. And they can do that without parental consent. And not many people realise this. So it's huge.
That's massive.
That kind of bill's being raised again in New South Wales, but this is a worrying trend that we're seeing across the country. And so I'm very passionate about asking our politicians to look at rolling back some of these things and revisiting the whole parental rights area.
It's so important, isn't it? I mean, obviously, at the age of 12, you've got, and I've got a couple of teenagers, so I know that these, people in their teens are changing their mind all the time. So, one day, are they going to be able to change their sex on their birth certificate repeatedly, or is it sort of once only? Like, how does that work? It just seems like a incredible situation to have, the people of that age, like, early teenagers making those decisions without any awareness at all from their parents.
Well, that's it. I mean, when you think about it, children can't buy alcohol. You've got to be 18 to do that. They can't drive a car. You've got to be 17, I guess, in Queensland. And yet at 12, they can change their sex. And then if they don't like it, next year they can change it again. So the way the law is in Queensland, it's every 12 months they can essentially front up to a magistrate and have their sex changed really at the jot of a pen.
Wow. And is there more required than that? Like, do they have to have, like a doctor's letter or, psychologist or something else? Or can they literally just turn up and say, I don't, I want to change my sex, and they just go ahead with it no matter what?
Well, no, it's basically, it can be done with a magistrate. So, there doesn't need to be great intervention. There doesn't need to be a sign-off. There doesn't need to be sex change surgery or anything like that. I guess with the signature of a medical practitioner or a magistrate, that process begins. But the problem with it obviously is that there doesn't need to be parental intervention.
That's incredible.
And so, we've just seen the disastrous show. I don't know if you saw it, Robbo, on Channel 7 last week, the Spotlight show that highlighted some of this. It was called Detransitioners, and it's caused incredible controversy, obviously. And they called it the most controversial show. But it highlighted some of these problems. They even had testimonies of young people that have gone well down the transitioning road who have had obvious regrets and then tried to back out of it. So this is a massive issue. And look, I think it will turn around. I think there is a turning around happening, but we can't give up on it. Yeah. Parents have got to stay the course.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the reality is that, you said this bill's already been put through the Queensland Parliament. So, even if there is a bit of a rethink, there's still a process and a lot of time involved, isn't there, to sort of, undo legislation? Like, it's not something that they can say, we've changed our mind, we'll back out of that. Right. But there's a lot of process involved with it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Look, it's hard to roll back anything once it becomes law. And I guess that's why we must embark on a long journey. I wish, Robbo, at the end of the day, I wish that there were 1,000 parents that would turn up on the steps of Parliament and protest things like this. I think if we moved in that sort of way, the parliamentarians would have to listen to us. But see, what happens often is that these things go through by stealth, and people find out usually weeks or even months later that legislation passed, and they wring their hands and shake their head and say, well, that should never have happened. But we really have to call people to action. We've got to inform them. We've got to keep them interested in politics, because at the end of the day, if you don't, somebody else will. And that's what happens with these issues, unfortunately. Yeah,
so true. Well, of course, you guys are doing a great job with that, and obviously the ACL website is a great place to visit to find out more about some of these issues and I guess other things that are bubbling away. Obviously, we haven't even touched on the misinformation and disinformation bill that is being debated at the moment. The ACL are calling for, or your slogan is bin the bill. because it really is very concerning, and there's been lots of people from lots of different sides, not just Christians, that are saying they're really concerned about what this bill is going to mean if it does get introduced. So lots of things you guys are doing. acl.org.au is a great place to go, or on social media as well. I mean, I know you have regular videos and lots of other information available through all the different social media channels and YouTube. But is there, I mean, obviously the misinformation bill is probably the key one at the moment on your website. Is there anything else that is bubbling away that people should check out the website to get updated on?
Yeah, look, there is a heap of stuff happening. You might be aware of the Babies Born Alive bill. That's the bill that Matt Canavan's sponsoring, along with Ralph Babette and Senator Alex Antic from South Australia. So this bill would basically protect children that are born after a botched abortion. And of course, there are many politicians that are even in denial that that's happening. But it is happening. It's happening in large numbers, unfortunately. Recently Alex Antic gave testimony in Parliament of a whistleblower midwife who gave first-hand evidence that it's actually happening here in Queensland. So these things are happening behind the scenes as well, Robbo. And again, we've got to stay with ears to the ground. And the ACL website's a great place to do that.
Well, as mentioned,
for anyone who doesn't know, the website also allows people to sign up and receive our regular newsletter.
Yep, well, that's a great place to go. So, as mentioned, acl.org.au is the website, and there is some really good tools on that website for that. As you mentioned, signing up for the newsletter, but even as different things come up, being able to easily sign a petition that's going to be sent through, or a letter to a MP, all available there. acl.org.au. Certainly, some very concerning things happening at the moment. Particularly, you've focused in on Queensland this week, Rob, but lots going on around the country, and it's I think lots of points for prayer, isn't it? For our nation and for the leaders of our nation as well. So thanks so much for the update today. It's been great to chat with you this morning on 2020.
You're a champion, mate. Thanks for that. Take care.